Welcome to Episode 3 of our Armageddon World War II documentary. The war at sea began the moment Germany invaded Poland in September of 1939. Britain and France immediately declared war on Germany, and within hours, German U-boats set out to disrupt Allied shipping routes. The oceans became a vital battleground, where control of supply lines would determine the survival of nations. Unlike battles on land, the conflict at sea stretched across thousands of miles and lasted every day of the war. Germany's submarine fleet, known as the U-boats, was relatively small at the beginning of the war. However, the U-boats were deadly and stealthy, able to slip beneath the waves and strike without warning. Their primary mission was to sink merchant ships carrying supplies from North America to Britain. These supplies included food, weapons, fuel, and raw materials. If Britain were cut off, it would eventually be starved into surrender. In the early days of the war, Allied convoys sailed with minimal protection. The Royal Navy did not yet have enough escort ships to cover every supply route. German U-boats took advantage of this vulnerability, operating in wolf packs that would coordinate attacks on slow-moving convoys. By communicating via radio, groups of submarines could swarm and destroy entire fleets in a single night. The first major U-boat success came on September 17, 1939, when the German submarine U-29 sank the British aircraft carrier HMS Courageous. The loss shocked the Royal Navy and confirmed the threat posed by submarines. Over the next few months, dozens of Allied ships were sent to the bottom of the Atlantic. Crews often had little warning before torpedoes struck, and survivors were left drifting in freezing waters. In response, Britain implemented a convoy system that grouped merchant ships together under the protection of armed escorts. These convoys were defended by destroyers, corvettes, and sometimes aircraft carriers. Although the convoy system slowed shipping, it dramatically reduced the success rate of U-boat attacks. Escort vessels used depth charges and sonar to locate and destroy submarines hiding below the surface. The technology used in naval warfare began to evolve rapidly. Sonar, also known as ASDIC, allowed ships to detect the presence of submarines by bouncing sound waves through the water. Radar was developed to track aircraft and surface vessels, especially at night or in poor visibility. Both technologies were still in their early stages and had limitations, but they offered hope in the fight against the hidden enemy. Germany developed new tactics to evade Allied defenses. U-boats would often lie in wait near known convoy routes and attack under cover of darkness. Some would surface and use their deck guns to sink ships without wasting torpedoes. Others would sneak into port areas or shallow waters where they were harder to track. The war beneath the waves became a deadly game of cat and mouse. British codebreakers played a vital role in the naval war. Working at Bletchley Park, a team of mathematicians and linguists worked to crack the German Enigma code used to coordinate U-boat operations. The breakthrough came in early 1940 when captured codebooks and machines allowed the British to read encrypted messages. This intelligence, known as Ultra, helped reroute convoys away from danger and gave the Allies a crucial advantage. The Battle of the Atlantic became a long and grinding struggle. Germany aimed to sink Allied shipping faster than it could be replaced. The United States, although still neutral in 1940, provided Britain with increasing levels of support through the Lend-Lease Act. American factories produced ships, weapons, and food that were shipped across the ocean under constant threat of attack. Merchant mariners became frontline heroes, braving torpedoes and storms alike. Neutral shipping was also at risk. German submarines sometimes mistook civilian ships for military targets. In other cases, they knowingly attacked neutral vessels suspected of aiding the Allies. This created diplomatic tensions, especially with the United States. President Franklin Roosevelt began expanding the American Navy and ordered patrols in the Western Atlantic to protect shipping. In the North Sea and English Channel, naval operations were constant. British warships patrolled the coasts, hunted for submarines, and laid minefields to disrupt enemy movements. Germany, meanwhile, laid its own mines and launched fast attack boats to harass coastal traffic. The waters around Britain became some of the most dangerous in the world. In addition to submarines, Germany deployed surface raiders disguised as merchant ships. These vessels, called auxiliary cruisers, sailed into the Indian and Atlantic Oceans, attacking Allied shipping far from the European front. Some of these ships operated for months without returning to port, using captured supplies and stealth to remain undetected. Their missions disrupted trade routes and spread fear among merchant crews. One of the most famous German surface raiders was the pocket battleship Admiral Graf Spee. In 1939, it sank several British merchant ships in the South Atlantic before being cornered near Uruguay. After a brief battle with British cruisers, the ship was scuttled by its crew to avoid capture. The destruction of the Graf Spee was a morale boost for the Allies and demonstrated that German surface ships could be defeated. The German Navy also deployed the powerful battleship Bismarck in 1941. Designed to dominate the seas, the Bismarck was equipped with heavy armor and massive guns. In its first operation, it sank the British battlecruiser HMS Hood, one of the most powerful ships in the Royal Navy. The loss of the Hood shocked Britain and triggered a massive hunt for the Bismarck across the Atlantic. British ships, aircraft and submarines converged on the Bismarck's last known location. After a prolonged chase, British forces disabled the battleship's steering with a torpedo strike. The Royal Navy closed in and engaged the Bismarck in a fierce battle. After taking heavy damage, the Bismarck was sunk on May 27, 1941. Only a few hundred of its crew survived. The destruction of the Bismarck removed a major threat from the Atlantic. In the Arctic Ocean, convoys also carried supplies to the Soviet Union through dangerous northern routes. These Arctic convoys faced not only U-boats, but also freezing temperatures, icebergs, and attacks by German aircraft based in Norway. Many ships were lost, and the crews endured some of the harshest conditions of the entire war. Yet these convoys provided vital support to the Soviet war effort. Germany responded to Allied advances with improved submarines and new tactics. U-boat pens, heavily fortified bases along the French coast, allowed for quick resupply and repair. These bases became targets for Allied bombers, though their thick concrete roofs made them nearly invulnerable. U-boat production increased, and Germany launched dozens of new submarines each month to replace losses. The use of aircraft in anti-submarine warfare became more effective over time. Long-range patrol planes were equipped with radar and depth charges, allowing them to spot and attack U-boats from the air. Escort carriers, small aircraft carriers attached to convoys, brought air power directly into the Atlantic. These innovations helped close the gap between U-boats and their prey. The naval war stretched beyond the Atlantic. In the Mediterranean, the British and Italian navies clashed over control of sea routes to North Africa. The island of Malta became a critical base for Allied operations, and it was subjected to relentless bombing by Axis forces. Despite heavy damage, Malta held out and remained a thorn in the side of Axis supply lines. In the Mediterranean Sea, control over shipping routes was essential for both the Axis and the Allies. The British relied on supplies reaching Egypt and the Middle East, while Germany and Italy needed to support their campaigns in North Africa. Naval battles, submarine attacks, and air raids turned the Mediterranean into a high-stakes battlefield. British submarines operated aggressively in the region, targeting Axis supply lines and naval vessels with great effect. One of the most important naval engagements in the Mediterranean was the Battle of Cape Matapan in March of 1941. British warships, using radar to detect enemy ships at night, launched a surprise attack on the Italian fleet. 3 Italian cruisers and 2 destroyers were sunk, and more than 2,000 sailors were killed. The battle demonstrated the growing importance of radar and the ability of well-coordinated Allied fleets to strike effectively. Naval warfare in the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean, and even the Pacific also began to intensify. German and Japanese submarines hunted shipping in distant waters, while British and Commonwealth forces protected critical trade routes stretching from Africa to Australia. The global nature of the naval war forced the Allies to divide their forces across vast distances, creating challenges in coordination and logistics. In early 1941, German U-boats entered a new phase of activity known as the Second Happy Time. As the United States had not yet entered the war, its coastal waters were largely undefended. German submarines patrolled the eastern seaboard and the Caribbean, sinking dozens of merchant ships with ease. The brightly lit coastlines of American cities made vessels easy targets, and the U-boats operated with near impunity. American entry into the war would not come until the end of 1941. But the increasing attacks on American shipping and growing support for Britain pushed the United States closer to involvement. Naval patrols were expanded, and new ships were ordered at an unprecedented rate. Shipyards worked around the clock to produce destroyers, escorts, and cargo vessels to support the war effort. Merchant mariners bore the brunt of the naval war. Often overlooked in official histories, these civilian sailors faced the same dangers as combat troops without the benefit of weapons or armor. Torpedoed in the night, burned in oil fires, or left adrift in lifeboats, their courage and sacrifice were vital to the survival of nations. Their efforts kept supply lines open even when the odds were against them. Convoy operations evolved into well-organized systems involving dozens of ships and multiple layers of protection. The use of convoy codes, radio silence, and signal flags reduced the chance of detection. Allied escort vessels developed new tactics to deal with wolf packs, including coordinated depth charge attacks and aggressive maneuvers to force submarines to surface. Morale among escort crews was high, driven by a sense of mission and growing success. One of the technological breakthroughs that changed the course of the naval war was the development of Hedgehog and Squid, two types of anti-submarine weapons that launched explosive charges in patterns ahead of escort ships. Unlike traditional depth charges, these systems detonated only upon contact with a submarine, increasing effectiveness. Combined with sonar, they greatly improved the ability to hunt and destroy U-boats. The Allies also developed deception tactics to lure and destroy submarines. Q-ships disguised as merchant vessels carried hidden weapons and crews trained to respond quickly when attacked. When a submarine surfaced to inspect a seemingly defenseless ship, the Q-ship would open fire, sometimes sinking the attacker before it could react. These risky operations were part of the larger effort to turn the tide of the underwater war. The use of aircraft became increasingly vital as the war progressed. Maritime patrol planes such as the British Sunderland and the American Catalina ranged far over the oceans, using radar and visual spotting to locate submarines. Equipped with depth charges and machine guns, these aircraft could attack and sink U-boats, often forcing them to remain submerged during daylight hours, which limited their mobility and effectiveness. Naval intelligence also played a crucial role. By monitoring German radio traffic and using decrypted messages from Enigma, Allied commanders could redirect convoys away from known U-boat positions. This cat-and-mouse game between intelligence agencies and naval forces saved countless lives and preserved vital supplies. The secrecy surrounding these efforts remained in place for decades after the war ended. In addition to the Atlantic, naval battles occurred throughout the European theater. In the Baltic Sea, German and Soviet naval forces clashed in support of ground operations. In the Black Sea, Soviet ships battled Romanian and German vessels to protect their coastal cities and support land campaigns. Although these regions saw fewer major engagements, they were essential to the overall war effort. Naval construction programs expanded rapidly. The United States launched the Liberty ship program, mass-producing cargo vessels using prefabricated sections. These ships were simple, functional, and produced in enormous numbers. While some were lost to enemy action, the overall increase in shipping capacity allowed the Allies to maintain and even expand their logistical networks. The growing industrial capacity of the Allies began to overwhelm German efforts. Although U-boats continued to sink ships, the rate of replacement soon exceeded the rate of losses. New technologies, improved tactics, and better coordination gradually turned the tide in favor of the Allies. By the middle of the war, U-boat crews faced greater risks with fewer successes. Morale among German submariners began to decline, losses increased, and the average lifespan of a U-boat crew shrank dramatically. Despite new models such as the Type 21 submarine, which offered improved speed and stealth, German naval power was no longer the threat it had once been. The focus of the war shifted to other theaters, but the struggle at sea continued to impact every front. For the British people, the survival of the convoys meant the difference between hunger and hope. Imported food, fuel, and weapons kept the country alive during its darkest hours. The war at sea may not have produced the dramatic visuals of land battles, but it was every bit as vital. Without victory in the Atlantic, victory on land would have been impossible. In the end, The war at sea was a battle of endurance, innovation, and willpower. It spanned every ocean and involved thousands of ships, aircraft, and men. From icy Arctic convoys to tropical waters of the Indian Ocean, sailors faced death and uncertainty with courage. Their sacrifices ensured that supply lines remained open and that the flame of resistance could keep burning. The early years of the Second World War belonged to the U-boats. Their silent attacks and staggering success created panic and disruption across the Allied world. But by adapting, coordinating, and investing in new technologies, the Allies turned the tide. The ocean, once a hunting ground for Germany's submarines, became a dangerous place for them to operate. As the focus of the war began to shift toward the vast Eastern Front and the growing conflict in the Pacific, the lessons of the war at sea remained clear. Control of the seas meant control of supply, movement, and momentum. The Battle of the Atlantic was not won in a single moment, but through years of grinding struggle and quiet determination. Thank you for watching. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to support the channel.